Welcome to the Loaded Box Podcast,
where we never finish first because we finish last.
Thank you once again for tuning in. We've got a special treat for you guys today. We're about to be joined by the Fantasy Fullback Dive Podcast, and we are going to debate the fantasy football value of the polarizing Tyreek Hill. You ready for this one, DJ? You got your A game today to debate a little bit?
Yeah, I did some prep. I'm excited. Didn't have to do too much for Tyreek since we've been talking about him all year. Ready to shit all over him. Maybe I'll swear at him. You never know.
Yeah, as our usual listeners know, we're not very high on Tyreek Hill, but we'll talk about this a little bit more when they join us. But yeah, we have some differing opinions. So you're going to hear both sides of the story, and then when you get to your fantasy draft, you're going to have to decide for yourself which side you like. So strap in for this one because their podcast believes in him just as much as we don't believe in him. So you ready for this, DJ? Good.
I'm ready.
Sounds good. All right. We've got the Wolf with us. Wolf, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, gentlemen. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm very excited to finally get this debate going.
Yeah, so are we. Do you want to tell? I know you guys are going to release this as well. So,
Absolutely.
So for your listeners, I am Ben, and I have my co-host with me, DJ, and we are the Loaded Box Podcast. And I'll let you introduce you and your podcast as well to our listeners.
Absolutely. So our podcast that I write for and work on is called the Fantasy Fullback Dive, brought to you by Roto Street Journal, which is our website. And we just started about a year and a half ago, really making some ground and just absolutely love the fantasy game. It's the best.
Nice. Yeah, we're with you. But one thing we're not with you on is the whole Tyreek Hill debate. So how...
That's how we got into the last couple months. You got some good messages in my inbox from you guys about Tyreek Hill.
Yeah. So how all this whole started, we posted our rankings, I think it was, like following one of the podcasts that we did, and it made its way to you guys, and we realized that you guys were in total disagreement. So we decided that we would do a joint podcast and debate each side. But after we made that decision, it quickly escalated because you guys took a little while to respond to a direct message. I got drunk, added some fuel to the fire. I did a little homework on this today. 6 of the 34 words in my direct message were curse words.
Good ratio right there.
Yeah, that is 18%, which is ironically the same completion percentage Alex Smith is going to have throwing to Tyreek this year.
Oh, please. Absolutely not. No, we're just going to go right into it already? I love it. That's
I know. We're ready for it. And we wanted to just check out right away where you have Tyreek ranked in your rankings, because I have him as wide receiver 34, and DJ's right there with wide receiver 36.
Yeah, and I have him up at wide receiver 15, so I'm clearly way higher than you guys. I actually have him as my 31st overall player, so I have him significantly higher than you guys, and I have many reasons, but do you want me to go first, or do you guys want to lead off with why you're so low, and hopefully I can help you
see the light maybe a little bit? Yeah, I mean, let's start with the positives right away. Let's start this out on a positive note. We'll let you, you can kick it off.
So I think there's 3 main arguments that go against Tyreek Hill, and a lot of them are just unfair because it's a lot of personal bias that I think people are suffering from Cordarrelle Patterson PTSD. They think this guy's a gadget player. He's going to be the next, just complete bust and not develop into a receiver. And I just think there's, he's getting judged unfairly because of the past and what other people have done from him. I think he's a much more technically sound receiver than any of these previous guys that are, gadget players that end up busting. I think he's got a much higher work ethic than these guys. He's really worked all offseason at developing his routes. He says he's modeling his game after Antonio Brown, which, smaller guy, but shifty, good explosiveness. And so far, everything has been positive. He's been the star of camp, is what all the reports say, that they've been connecting on deep balls. I know it's puff pieces. I know it's camp. They're going to, you got to take all that with a grain of salt. But still, at the same time, everyone's saying, when it comes from every beat writer's mouth, not just one, but every single guy saying his game's on the next level. He's the star. He's catching deep balls. He's catching intermediate games. He's ripping off screen passes. I mean, this is a guy that I just think the gadget player notion needs to be put to rest. He's developing. He's got the work ethic. He's going to really be a complete receiver. Maybe not on, obviously, Antonio Brown. That's a complete hyperbole. He's not on that level yet. But that's who he says he models his game after. And I think that's a really good guy for him to go after, that smaller frame but good functional strength. I just love him, and I don't think he's a gadget player. What are your guys' thoughts of him as just a receiving talent?
So, you talk about how you say he's not a gadget player, but 6 of the 12 touchdowns that he had last year were rushing and special teams. I feel like that is the definition of being a gadget player type guy right there.
I think that what that does is kind of emphasizes his versatility. I think he can be used in the running game and the screen game. And maybe last year, yes, he was a little bit raw. He was coming out as a rookie. I think he started as a running back in his college career. So totally there's a transition going there. I just think he's going to be a little bit more developed than he was last year. Plus, they're saying he's still going to be used in the run game and the screen game. So to me, that's just music to my ears that he's going to be used even more versatile. In addition to as a complete receiver running the full route tree, he might get some snaps at running back and different things. I just think that even increases his ceiling more than necessarily hurts him.
I'm going to say a couple of the positives. Like, I looked at it from both ways. So, I'm obviously with my rankings, I'm not high on him, but I agree that he runs better routes and he's a more complete receiver than some people do give him credit for. My situation with him is I like him as a player. One of my arguments against him, though, is I don't like his situation. I don't like the whole Alex Smith thing. I feel like his history with receivers is very well documented, and because of that, it makes me a little bit lower on him. So what I would want to do with Tyreek Hill is let it play out this year, not own him in fantasy, and then when Pat Mahomes takes over, presumably next year, that's probably when I'm more likely to take him, because if Tyreek Hill does a little bit worse in 2017, his ADP falls, Mahomes comes in, Mahomes has a higher ceiling, I should say, than Alex Smith, that's the time that I might jump onto that Tyreek Hill bandwagon and go from there.
I think that's a great point. I mean, Mahomes definitely can bring out more of his game than Alex Smith can with the deep ball and increased arm strength. I'm 100% with you there. The only thing I would disagree with, though, is if you wait and see, there's a real chance, and I genuinely believe it because I have him up at 31 overall, that Tyreek Hill could explode this year, and you could get him at a 4th-round price. He's going around pick 50 right now.
Yep.
So if you get that guy that, you say you want to wait a year and see, have the quarterback thing that could really unlock his potential, you might end up costing yourself a chance at that 4th-round pick that really explodes and blows up into a wide receiver 1. That's obviously a big, if with him. But for a 4th-round price, I mean, you're not asking for the complete world at this point. It's not your 1st round or anything like that. I think that reduces the risk. Obviously, you want to hit the 4th round, so it does make it a bit risky. But I just think that logic might make you cost you a chance at one of the most explosive players in the league that has one of the biggest ceilings for the price point he's at.
Yeah.
So my biggest worry with him is it's some of the things that Ben hit on, but Alex Smith is literally just a few years removed from not throwing a touchdown to a wide receiver. That's already a red flag to me. But just as an offense in the whole, they're going to run the ball a lot, and they're going to throw it to Travis Kelce. Same as the Patriots get the ball out of their hands quick, and for the last 10 years, their outside wide receivers just haven't been successful. I feel that's similar to what kind of the Chiefs do this year. And what?
No, I was going to say that is like the basis of Andy Reid's attack is quick strike, that West Coast offense. The only way I could see that really working in Hill's favor is I think he's similar to Odell and Brandon Cooks and those guys in the sense that he can take a slant and just rip it necessarily succeed. He's the type of guy that can outrun everybody once he's got it in his hands. So I know a lot of people are citing Smith's reluctance to go deep, and I do think that is a concern. Again, I think Pat Mahomes will be a better quarterback. I also think this is a guy that can score as soon as he gets the ball from any place on the field. So I actually almost like the quick strike because it says they've been connecting a lot on those slants and that he's been pretty much uncoverable. You can't press him at the line of scrimmage because he has that deep threat, but then he just takes it in so quick that his inside slant game, I guess, is crushing camp right now. So I think that's certainly a negative narrative that could end up getting turned on its head. We'll see.
And I got one more, Ben.
Yeah, that's fine.
Hill is literally the only big play threat on that offense. So don't you think defenses will just automatically take away that one guy who can score on you in an instant and win a game? Because I'm really not worried about any other guy defensively outside of Tyreek Hill being able to have those explosive type plays and beat us. I just, if I'm a defense, I'm focused.
All right, I'm going to let DJ recap what he was saying there because my internet is playing some games with me. So I apologize for the sound quality, but we pride ourselves on sloppiness, so let's do this.
Just to summarize what I was saying, basically I just think defenses will take that one big play threat away and take him out of the game, remove him completely, and dare anybody else to beat them.
And I think that's the toughest point to argue against for all the ones you've brought up, because that is true. I think if Macklin was there, a lot of people are saying it's going to help him. He's going to be the number one target, and there's no doubt about it. The increased volume is going to, bring him to the next level. I do worry that the lack of a real threat next to him. I mean, Kelsey is good, but in terms of another receiver, he could get double teamed, and that is a very big concern. We had a Chiefs insider beat writer, Chris Clark, on our podcast, and he was mentioning, as good as Hill is looking, he is nervous that defenses are going to key on him. So if he busts, that's the one reason I think it's going to be. It's not because I think he's a gadget player. It's not because I think his scoring rate was unsustainable or Alex Smith couldn't deliver him the rock. It's more that other defenses could now tape on him. They could scheme and take him out. I'm clearly betting, though, when I have him at 31, that the talent's going to transcend it. He's already beating, their best corners in camp, and they had Marcus Peters, some good corners, and he's saying this guy's impossible to cover. He's a good creative mind. He's had some monster seasons out of the guys like Deshaun Jackson, built similar molds. I think this is just going to be a really special season that you can get in round 4 and carry it. And if you don't, it's round 4. You can make up the ground, get Eric Decker in round 7. You can find guys to fill in that risk. I think it's one of those risks that's just worth the ceiling, especially given how deep receiver is and how you can find somebody to make up the ground if you end up busting.
See, what I was going to say about that was because, like you said, let's say he does have awesome impact plays and he ends up as your receiver 1. Yeah, then a 4th round pick was worth it. But so I look at the previous history. So Hill, according to the non-PPR stats last year, I believe was wide receiver 15. The year before that, Macklin was their best receiver, wide receiver 16. The 2 years before that, Dwayne Bowe finished as wide receiver 63. That was their top receiver. And the year before that, Dwayne Bowe finished as wide receiver 44. I think Macklin and Bowe are both more complete receivers than Tyreek Hill is. So let's just say Tyreek Hill does get contained a little bit, and you spent a 4th round draft pick on him. So he's clearly probably your number 2 receiver then. There's that really good chance that if you're taking a guy in the 4th round and he ends up around wide receiver 50 or 60, you're missing out on a guy that could have finished in like the top 25 of receivers, which could cost you some weeks. And I kind of feel like if you blow that 4th round pick on a guy that doesn't perform well, yeah, the rest of the draft is going to impact it. But that could cost you weeks, if not a chance, like maybe in the playoffs.
Absolutely. There's 4th round pick. I shouldn't discount it. There's a high opportunity cost there. And there, guys like Keenan Allen, Devontae Adams, there's guys going there that certainly could develop into wide receiver 1s as well. Right. So the opportunity cost is very real. I don't buy the whole argument. I know there's obviously he sucked with Dwayne Bowe, and there was the whole season he didn't throw a touchdown to a receiver. But part of that just is, I think, Andy Reid by design. It's, wide receiver 15 for.
All right, and even though you can't tell because it's a podcast, technical difficulties are dominating us. So I'm going to let Wolf jump in here. He was talking about how Andy Reid's offenses. I'm going to let him describe it. Here we go.
So a lot of people do keep bringing up this argument that, Dwayne Bowe was the wide receiver 63 and no receivers caught a touchdown and all this. But I'm happy you brought up, too, when you brought that point, is Jeremy Macklin was the wide receiver 15, and so was Tyreek Hill last year. I don't think it's something that year to year we can be like, because 3 years ago they caught 0 touchdowns and, Dwayne Bowe was a wide receiver 16. He was their top option. It's year to year with Andy Reid. He figures out how he's going to scheme to his talent. He figures out who his playmakers are, and he just funnels looks to him, whether it's the running back, whether it's, Deshaun Jackson. He always figures out who his talent is and how to best manufacture touches for them. And so out of the backfield like you guys mentioned earlier. I just think this guy's going to see. They're already predicting 75 or so catches, and if you get this type of talent, 75 catches, he's going to do a ton of damage, especially if he gets 20, 30 carries on top of that. I just think he's so versatile and shouldn't be punished because of the past unsuccessful history of certain receivers, because year to year it's just so different when it comes to Andy Reid.
Another thing that I think kills Tyreek Hill, and maybe some people's minds, so I didn't have him in any leagues last year, but if you look at weeks 15 and 16 last year, which in most fantasy leagues, that's your semis and your finals, he didn't record a single catch on either of those games. And he did score double-digit fantasy points in both of those games because he had over 60 rushing yards, and I think he had a touchdown in both. But I'm not going to be able to rely on that. So like I said, I like Tyreek as a football player in the right offense. But when it comes to it's why it kills me in my mind. I just don't, it's not sustainable enough for him to be a wide receiver 2 for me.
Right. It is a dice roll. I'm banking more on his usage is going to evolve, and he's going to be a more consistent receiver, more targeted, maybe 5-6 targets in addition to 2-3 carries. You're right; it is a scary thing to bet your horse on a guy that some games goes catchless. But
I don't even own a horse.
What's that?
I don't even own a horse. I have no horses to bet.
Sorry, well then I don't know what to put on this one, but I'm just convinced it's going to be a beautiful mix of this great talent developing to the next level of his game. All reports so far, all the evidence pointing to this happening in camp and everything like that. In Andy Reid, I do trust as a coach. I think even though there's been some unsuccessful years in the past, that's more a lack of the talent that he likes. Tyreek Hill is that mold of explosive playmaker. Get him the ball in space, get it to him deep. I think it's just going to be a ton of volume and talent that just blows the door off the league and really just steps into one of the next great receivers of this game. That's how I see the situation. And for the 4th round price right now, or for you guys, I think you have him at wide receiver 30. So you're thinking 7th, 8th round. That's just too much upside, that potential to have that type of explosion. I can't leave that on the table in round 4.
I do have one fun fact about Tyreek Hill as well.
All right, let's hear it.
Wolf, DJ, and Ben, that's the 3 of us. We combined have the same amount of 100-yard receiving games in the NFL as Tyreek Hill does.
Nice.
It's a good point. There's tons. You have all the stats, and it makes sense that he wasn't a complete receiver last year. That point you guys can make very clearly, and I understand. I just think I'm kind of trying to paint the picture of the future. I think he's going to develop into a much more complete receiver, and just not a gadget player, just the next kind of quick twitch guy like Brandon Cooks, Odell. I think he's going to be in that mold and really develop and just thrive with that quick strike attack. I don't think he's going to need the deep ball of Al. Believer in the talent. I really am.
So you bring up evidence and beating guys. What about him hitting girls and just karma in general coming back on him?
I do hate that. It's tough to root for scumbags. I don't like that whole thing. There's just so many of them in the NFL. I can't even comment on that. I try to leave fantasy, and personal feelings at the door because otherwise it costs you. You know how it goes. I can't draft Peyton Manning as a Patriots fan. I missed out on a bunch of 50-yard TD seasons. It's tough to try to keep fantasy and emotions separate, and this is a case where I just try to block that all out and pretend like it doesn't exist. As horrible as it is, I'm with you.
Karma's going to ruin his whole fantasy value.
DJ,
that's a good argument. I can't argue against it.
That is dirty pool bringing up domestic issues, man. Holy cow, that's a hell of a final. Was that your final card? Was that your all-in poker chip right there?
That was the last thing I wanted to lay on the table.
The drum.
I don't know, man. When it comes to fantasy, I kind of
6 to the house.
I feel like when it comes to fantasy, you almost have to put aside all of your personal morals and beliefs, like Zeke Elliott getting suspended 6 games or whatever. Let's jump on him real. Do you guys want to talk about Tyreek real quick?
Absolutely. Fresh news. I'd love to talk about Zeke.
Yeah. So Zeke, as of now, anyways, being out 6 games, I think that drops him in most everyone's fantasy rankings. I'm seeing now a lot of probably 3rd rounds for him. Wolf, where do you have him sliding to, and how do you value a guy like that now when he's missing a huge chunk of games?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. I actually just worked on a piece all day today. I've been going back and forth. Where do I want him to land? And I recorded an instant reaction on Twitter, and I was similarly, round 3-ish. But after, second thought and just kind of looking at my big board and starting to move him and really digging in, I'm actually still convinced that Ezekiel Elliott in round 2 can win you a fantasy title. And I know that seems crazy. He's out 6 games.
Right.
For one, that he's just an unbelievable talent in terms of there's only David Johnson and Le'Veon Bell. When he's on the field, those are the only 2 guys that are going to keep pace with him. And then you get in this guy at the fantasy crunch time, week 8, he's going to be coming back after that. So he's fresh, he's hungry, he's angry, he's motivated, whereas the rest of the league's been taking a pounding for half the year. You get this unbelievable talent that no one else can rival other than 2 guys at the best time of the year. And then I just think there's, the question is, you got to make the playoffs for it to matter. I just think there's so much depth this year. Every time I look, there's guys like Eric Decker, Deshaun Jackson, obviously those receivers, not running backs, but Bilal Powell, going in round 6, the 4th easiest running back schedule to start the year. Jonathan Stewart, the easiest running back schedule to begin the year. I can see him having a few, plodding games to carry you. I'm not a believer in McFadden. I think, he's kind of just – he has the hardest running back schedule to begin the year in those first 5 games. He's 30, he's injury prone. So I don't think the route is you draft McFadden and Zeke and then you hope for it. Draft Doug Martin and Jacquizz Rodgers and have the Tampa Bay backfield carry you for those 6 weeks. There's just so many. Terrence West goes in round 10. He's going to get carries. Danny Woodhead goes in round 8. 3rd easiest running back schedule for the first 5 games. I think there's just enough depth that you can stomach it and create a competitive roster, go maybe 500 for those first 6 weeks, and then you tell me you could get Zeke and like David Johnson because he falls to the end of round 2, or Zeke and Lev Bell, or Mike Evans and Zeke, or whatever it is for your fantasy playoffs. I love that. I'm still all in on Zeke being a second rounder.
Yeah, you actually answered my follow-up question without me even asking it, so I'm pretty impressed by that. But DJ, are you the same way? I saw you nodding a little bit. I think the podcast listeners could hear your head rattling.
Where I'd almost take him at the end of the first round if I was sitting there at the end of the first round and he was an option there, because with Le'Veon Bell last year, I mean, in hindsight, I wish I would have just drafted him at the end of the first round in some of the leagues I was in because he was so dominant after he came back. Mm-hmm. Plus, I mean, more than likely he's going to get his suspension reduced, I'm guessing. Tweeted this the other day, Ben, from our account, but this is one reason why you don't do drafts before, I think, the week before the season starts, because things like this, but he's going to drop in drafts that you're in for no reason, and I would love to be the guy that gives him late first, early second round and take my chances with a guy filling in. Whether it is me grabbing Darren McFadden, I'll take my chances with that just because I still think he's not going to put up Zeke numbers, but with the offensive line, he can still put up average numbers that can compete with other teams in your fantasy football matchup. So, and then you're getting Zeke back after who knows how many games. And once you make those playoffs, you could be unstoppable with a guy like that.
Does Zeke Elliott have the most unique shaped head and face of anyone in the NFL?
He's like skinny fat.
Yeah, definitely. Looks like a chipmunk, like an Ewok. I don't even know what it is, but it's like adorable but weird at the same time. I don't even get what's going on.
Yeah,
he looks like, if you saw him just his face, you would think he was like 270 pounds.
Like dude.
He looks real fat.
Instead of when he's doing his air eating of the cereal, it looks like he's actually inhaling a bunch of cake and it just went to his head. Yeah,
exactly.
It's an impressive mug. I don't know what else to say about him.
Cool, but in Jim Belushi in Animal House, where he pops it and the food comes flying out of his mouth. Yeah, that's I'm a zip. That's what Zeke looks like all the time.
Dude, Zeke Elliott's going to listen to this, and we are all next in line.
It is cool. It's cool, though, that me and you are kind of in agreement on this one after our Hill debate, because a lot of the experts I was reading, and I kind of cite in my article that I was working on, Matthew Berry, Jamie Eisenberg, all these big names. NFL.com. They're all saying, round 3 or 4 at the earliest. Yahoo Sports, most of those guys are saying that. And I think, just the terrible sheep advice that is out there too much in the big name sites. And that's why guys like us are going to take over eventually, because they just give this weak advice that's not going to win people leagues. Zeke's a no-brainer in round 2, and if you pass up on him, you're going to end up regretting it.
Yep.
Nice. I like that. Like you said, we can disagree on certain things and agree on others. Yeah. I mean, I think, Wolf, we got to have a beer sometime when you pop into Wisconsin. I think that's in order.
So it's Wisconsin you guys are from. Okay. I'm up in Massachusetts myself. I'm a Patriots fan. Are you guys Green Bay?
Oh, we might have to end this podcast early.
Patriots fan.
DJ's.
My entire room, I should show you the quick angle. It's like a Tom Brady poster there, Gillette Stadium over there. It's just, I have a painting of Tom Brady. It's disgusting. Oh, you're a Dolphins fan? Yeah. Is that what this is? Oh, I'm sorry for you, man.
I have the same. Yeah, but I have the same deal you do. I have an Aaron Rodgers shrine behind my TVs right now, and we were saying on a previous podcast, if you took a black light to those, you never know what you're going to find there.
Oh, just disgustingly coated with gross liquids. Yes, I'm sure. Well, now you're a Dolphins fan. What do you think about Jay Cutler? I'm intrigued by that.
So we hit on it a little bit in our last podcast, and what it boils down to for me is I like the signing because of the fact that Matt Moore is not a full schedule type quarterback for me. I don't have enough faith in Matt Moore over the course of 16 games to actually have that team win at a consistent basis and compete potentially for the playoffs. Whereas Cutler, I don't think Cutler's an awesome quarterback by any means, but I have more faith in Cutler having that team reach their potential than Matt Moore. And before, I'll just keep it quick because we talked about it last time. What happens if the Dolphins don't get this veteran? They roll with Matt Moore, and Matt Moore gets hurt. The team is done. They're buried. They needed to sign someone.
Check out the first 15 minutes of the next podcast, and you can get our last podcast.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll check it out. My main take is I think it's going to actually help Devontae Parker. That's the one guy I see. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but Cutler with his history of just chucking to the big bodies and just letting them go up and make plays. If anyone's going to do that on that team, Parker has that natural ability. I think Cutler's the guy that could really bring it out in him after he's been dominating in camp from what everybody's.
Yeah, see, that was my instant reaction to the whole Parker concept of it, but then I looked into a little bit more. When Cutler actually played with Gase really reeled him in, and it was a lot more short passes. So he kind of took away that gunslinger mentality. So everyone's like, oh, Parker's stock's rising. I don't know if it should rise quite as high as people were saying.
So maybe it's Landry that ends up being the beneficiary. I didn't do any of the real back research of Gase in that one year. That's a good thing. I should definitely go look into more. That's right. Interesting. I would have it's like what you said. It's an instant gut reaction. Like, oh, Parker, chuck it up. But maybe it's a little more behind the scenes. That's good to know.
Yeah. Definitely look into that because there's something to that. I agree that the potential where if Cutler does play like his old self, Parker is the beneficiary of that. But who knows? If Gase continues to reel him in, then I think it's not quite as high as what people have. I know you got to get going. You got a big TV show. You got to get big TV show to watch.
You're like the only two humans I know in the world that don't watch it. It blows my mind.
We are, man. We probably are. I mean, at some point I'll probably get into it, but I don't know. There's just so much else on, and I'm so far behind. Like I don't know that I can just jump into Game of Thrones right now. I think I got to give it some time. It's a huge
commitment. It's a huge commitment. You have 7 seasons of stuff, but I'm telling you, so much death and murder and sex and drinking and it's just the best. Everything about it's awesome.
Sounds like a Tuesday for Zeke Elliott.
Yeah. Seriously, yeah.
Let's do one more of the players we were going to talk about, and then we'll see where the timing is on this. Want to do Mariota or Lamar Miller? I'm up for either.
Both. Either one's fine with me. Whatever's better for you.
Yes, you're running it, so might as well take the pick.
All right, let's talk about Lamar Miller then, because you guys have him all the way up at RB7, and it's not that I don't see his upside, but there's certainly some names that you have below Lamar Miller that I just think have a tremendous amount more ceiling. And the main thing I'm worried about Miller, and if you have him up at 7, you're probably not worried about this, but the one thing I wanted to ask you guys about is Donta Foreman, this big guy, 250, runs for his size, his 40 was ridiculous. Wins the Doak Walker Award as the best RB in the nation. Yards on 4 carries. Are you guys not worried at all about that guy being a potential vulture or even a threat to his early down carries? That's the one thing that has me a little bit hesitant on Miller this year is he didn't look great last year, and then they go and get this awesome running back. Is that going to work? Does that worry you guys at all? What are your thoughts on Donta Foreman?
So my theory on Lamar Miller is, so a few podcasts back we did a 3 bold predictions, and one of my bold predictions was that Lamar Miller finishes as a top 7 fantasy running back this year. And you bring up the whole Foreman issue, and that's kind of what I like about it. I did being a Dolphins fan, I've seen a lot of Lamar Miller, and then just looking at the distribution of his carries, Lamar Miller was actually more effective and had more touchdowns when he had less touches. So when you think of fantasy, you're like, oh, I need the guy that gets all the touches. I don't want any competition. Lamar Miller was kind of the outlier in that situation because he was getting the ball so much that I think it was wearing him down and he wasn't being very effective. Whereas if you can use him more sparingly in more opportune positions to set him up to succeed, I think his yards per carry increases. I think his opportunity for longer touchdowns increases. And I kind of like the addition of Foreman. I don't see it as too big of a downfall. And the fact that Foreman, yeah, they brought him in. They obviously used a decent draft pick on him. It's still a rookie running back that wasn't like a top 10 pick. So I don't think it's like this instant Foreman's going to jump in and just start taking carries from him. I think they're still going to utilize Miller in a way. And even if they were to, the whole quarterback thing, I think DJ will probably talk a little bit more about Miller. But one last thing I have, I actually like Miller better if Watson gets in because I think Deshaun Watson can take the offense to the next level. And in turn, I think that sort of rejuvenates both Miller and DeAndre Hopkins in 2017.
Yeah, I'm actually on Wolf's side on this one. So those are Ben's rankings. I actually have Miller ranked as my 16th running back.
Okay.
Yeah, the podcast is quickly turned against me.
I flat out, what?
I said the podcast is quickly turned against me. It's going to be YouTube versus me.
I flat out don't think they've improved at quarterback to open up the passing game to help that running game at all. I do not like Deshaun Watson as a quarterback prospect in the NFL at all. I don't think he's going to end up being a good player. That's my opinion on him. So I don't like that draft pick. I don't like what the fuck's his name, Savage, at all. Either one of those guys, I don't think improves this offense at all any more than what they did with Brock Osweiler.
I don't think there's anywhere to go but up with. I mean, Osweiler is just one of the.
I just think it's a lateral move. I think it's a lateral. I think you're just staying flat. I don't like what they've done at quarterback. I still think they're going to be garbage and probably not make the playoffs because it's just going to be defense and still no offense and running game. They still have that one guy to focus on. And I just was looking up today. Houston was tied for second to last in rushing last year, but they were sixth highest team in attempts.
They were second to last in what?
Second to last in rushing TDs with 8. But they were the sixth highest team in rushing attempts.
Yeah.
This year.
I think so. The big if is if Deshaun Watson or whoever the quarterback is can take this offense to another level. That's kind of the deciding factor between Miller. If you, I'm kind of in the middle ground of you guys where I think I'm worried about Foreman. I think he's a goal line vulture, but I also agree with Ben in that I think if Watson gets in there, I like the mobility that he has. I think he can extend plays because of that. I think you maybe opens up a zone read type of attack, which Miller could potentially be good in. I could see that being a very big beneficiary. I thought Watson looked pretty decent the other night. He looked a little poised. Sorry, I can't get that word out. He seemed like he was NFL ready. I know he's going against twos, and he's got to obviously do it against ones. Yeah. But I think he didn't look like he was scared of the stage. So I do think the mobility of action with Hopkins, I think that could really help him. But I'm also nervous that you mentioned those rushing TDs. Even if the attempts in the red zone go up because the offense takes a step, I do see him going to Foreman, the bigger guy, the stronger guy, in which case Miller just doesn't benefit that much from the offense taking that next step. So I'm kind of like the middle ground between you guys.
There you go.
I hate him.
I think at the end of the day, though, Lamar Miller is still just one of like a handful, like 6 or 7 running backs who's going to be the clear running back where you don't really need to worry too much about a backup taking too many carries. So that alone, like I was just saying how like I don't want him to have a million touches, but he's still going to be like the main guy that gets the bulk of those running back touches. I don't know. It's like
tell that to Todd Gurley.
Yeah, but it's like Wolf said. Yeah, I hear you there. But it's like what Wolf said though. Like there's nowhere to go but up. Like that offense, maybe it struggles a little bit, but it cannot struggle the way that it did last year. I just don't see it happening.
We have a funny, my co-host who couldn't join us tonight, but he wrote a great article. It's titled like 25 things that are better than Brock Osweiler. And it's like pretty much like dropping the soap in jail and like getting destroyed is better than having Brock Osweiler as your quarterback.
Yeah, no, he sucks. I just think that these quarterbacks suck just as bad.
Yeah, I mean, they just can't be that bad. Brock Osweiler is the worst thing that's ever been on an NFL field.
I don't know, man.
It was horrible. But yeah, I do got to run to get to Game of Thrones. So I really appreciate you guys having me on. It was a great time. We got to do this again soon. If you're listening and you want to find our stuff, it's Roto Street Journal on Twitter, Roto ST Journal. Mine is Roto Street Wolf. If you want to find me, our podcast is the Fantasy Fullback Dive. But I'd love to get another debate in at some point before the off season, guys. This was fun.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming on. I basically will echo what you said. It was a blast. I apologize for my lack of internet today. It didn't really work out too well, but we definitely have to do it again. So I appreciate you coming on. So thanks again, and for your guys' podcast, if you're able to record, not just record it obviously, but put it on. We're on Twitter at LoadedBox, and then you can see our personal Twitter handles from there. So thanks again for listening, and appreciate Wolf for coming on and spending some time, even with Game of Thrones happening in a matter of seconds.
Bye.
Alrighty, guys. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
You bet.
Alrighty.